Hillman came from a small town called Zager in the Pale of Settlement, which was the sort of large area in Poland and Lithuania, but occupied by Russia, that was designated a kind of Jewish area.
And it was a rabbinical family from many, many generations. And the older boys were always to be sent to yeshiva to become rabbis. So my father and his brother were sent to yeshiva.
And he, like thousands of other young Jewish men and women, were caught up in the social turmoil of Tsarist Russia, in particular the 1905 revolution in Russia.
The two boys ran away from yeshiva and joined the Jewish revolution called the Bund,
which was a kind of socialist Jewish organization.
And from that experience came his whole attitude toward work, working people, working conditions, what the revolution was all about.
Hillman was very active as an organizer. He actually organized a small general strike in Zager. He was in prison several times. Jail became for him, and like many others, a kind of schoolhouse where he was now exposed not just to the mainstream texts of the Western Enlightenment, but to the radical texts of Western Enlightenment. He had to flee Russia. He was wanted by the Tsarist police, so he flees in 1906.
And he decided to come to America.
Went to Chicago and got a job working for Hart, Shafter and Marks as an apprentice cutter. Conditions were abysmal. Workers had no rights at all. They worked under the most dangerous conditions, unsanitary conditions, endless hours. 1,001 abuses would produce these periodic revolts. This happened at Hart, Shafter and Marks.
My mother worked at Hart, Shafter and Marks. And one day, the straw boss came and said he was reducing their homework by a quarter of a penny. And my mother was enraged at this and got up out of her chair and started walking out of the shop. And 16 young girls walked after her on strike. And it turned out that my mother was the leader of the women, and my father happened to be the leader of the men. And that's how they met on the picket line.
The strike went on for months at Hart, Shafter and Marks, as it would elsewhere in America, and Hillman emerged as a leader, and soon thereafter became the president of the Amalgamated Clothing Workers of America.
Sidney was a brilliant organizer who organized Jewish and Italian and Slavic immigrants who didn't speak English, who worked in the same factories, didn't speak the same languages, into one strong union. But he was much more than that. He was a visionary, way ahead of his time.
Hillman never thought that a union was only about issues of collective bargaining. He always thought there were greater issues at stake off the job, and this had to do with the health and well-being of workers generally, in the union and not in the union.
The union pioneered programs that eventually became adopted by the government to raise the living standards of workers in this country.
The Amalgamated pioneered in building low-cost cooperative housing. They pioneered in introducing unemployment insurance. They introduced cooperative labor banking.
They started their own health clinics. With the idea of Social Security would not have happened without the Amalgamated pushing the idea of old age retirement. He helped found the CIO, America's movement of industrial workers,
which, by organizing basic industry in America and by championing New Deal reform legislation, changed the face of America and of American capitalism.
The union's goal was really to create a middle class in America, and they succeeded.
There was a much larger vision. It was just not wages and hours. It was to make life better for people.
Hillman reached the acme of his power during World War II.
He became one of Franklin Roosevelt's closest advisors, and during the Second World War, the president relied upon Sidney to develop production to win the war.
Together with management, labor is turning out guns and ships and tanks and planes that will guarantee victory for those who are fighting the battle of democracy.
He was always about representing the people who needed a voice and needed some power most. And in the Hillman Awards, we try to shine a light on precisely those works of journalism that do that.
We're rewarding progressive journalism, people that dig down deep, people that expose inequality, people that expose arrogance of power.
From Edward R. Murrow to the New York Times and the Pentagon Papers, Woodward and Bernstein, The Uncovering of Poverty by Michael Harrington, the coverage of civil rights struggles by Murray Kempton and others, Harry Ashmore, a Southern editor, Barbara Ehrenreich's Nickel and Dime.
There is a commitment to honoring journalism which advances social justice, economic justice, a vision of a different America, a vision that is in sync with what Sidney Hillman conceived of and worked for.
Any journalist or historian or political writer today who wins the Hillman Award should be very proud and know what that historical background is, that they're connecting up to a cause which inflamed the hearts and minds of millions of people for a long generation.